What's up, freaks and geeks? Welcome back to another edition of Friday Night Frights. We have a good one in store for you this week. One that has it hits a special place for me in my interests and things that I've been into for a good portion of my life. So this week we are jumping into the paranormal. We are talking about the real life story, the real life family behind the hit movie, The Conjuring. We are going to be discussing the Perron family hauntings, jumping into a bit about Ed and Lorraine, and discussing some of the differences between what has been written by the family, what's been said by the family, and what was portrayed in the movie. So mainly we're looking at The Conjuring versus House of Darkness, House of Light. It's a whole trilogy. For those of you that are fans of the paranormal, a little bit of backstory, Andrea Perron wrote a trilogy of books that are by Christian learned the hard way in preparation for this. They are not easy breezy reading. They are very dense and almost universally character work. So you have a lot of descriptors on feelings and situations. She does a very good job of placing you in the scene.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's like I said, it's a lot. So my first question is, Christian, have you ever seen The Conjuring?
I'd have. I even rewatched it earlier today to refresh myself.
Nice. Yeah, I was definitely a bit more of a snob when The Conjuring came out, because I've been, as you all are going to learn about me, I am a longtime fan of paranormal horror and a studier of the paranormal and all of that. And so this is a topic that's been of interest to me for a long time. And I think knowing a bit about the players involved also has hampered the movie for me. Just knowing that being said, from a cinematography standpoint, they did a lot that movies have been pulling from for the better part of the last decade, that the Conjuring universe has been a thing.
Yeah, and I believe I've seen everything they've brought out. Some of them good, some of them they exist, I suppose. I don't think I've seen them. That'll be like movies. I don't think they're bad necessarily. They're just not. I would never rewatch them.
Yeah. So we are going to be talking about those two, and then the differences between the real story, the film adaptation, and we're going to be getting into some of our thoughts and, yes, even some experiences with the spiritual and the supernatural. But first things first, we're going to talk about the Perron family. Most of what we have, like I said, is through the voice of Andrea Perron. Now, one of the big things about her is that she will discuss all of this with her family, but it all kind of gets poured through her filter. So a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight is going to be the juxtaposition of The Conjuring and the written work from Andrea Perron. That's why that most of what we have regarding it comes from her. That being said, they lived in the farmhouse, the infamous farmhouse, from 1970 until June of 1980. And she and other family members have talked about how the house has had a profound impact on everybody that everybody has responded to differently when expressing some of their thoughts about everything that went down. That's one of the fascinating things to me about following this case and watching some of the public discussions from the family is the people who have been outspoken are they really largely haven't changed a word of their story. It's been pretty consistent since their story really gained more notoriety through the Warrens and through the movie and all of that. So she describes the house as a portal that is cleverly designed or cleverly disguised as a farmhouse. Finds the whole thing deeply enlightening and talks a lot about how she has this emotional connection to the house, likes to visit the house, and that growing up in such an environment was both enlightening and transformative. And she reflects on how the experience solidified her belief in the paranormal and has had a profound impact on what she understands of just the matter of existence. And that's one thing that I think is interesting to talk about as we talk about the unusual, as we talk about these different experiences that folks have had. She speaks very openly about how being there was such a busied experience with experiencing all of the different entities that it's had this impact on the fact that, like, when you talk to her, and I found this with a lot of folks that really claim heavily in paranormal experiences, there is a confidence that exists in their tone of voice and their demeanor whenever they talk about it, that isn't always present. And that very thing resonates with somebody like me because I'll go ahead and start tipping my hand that I have had firsthand experience of what it means to be at a place that is a portal for certain energies. Now watch as the numbers plummet or go through the roof because I either have gone off the deep end or this is good TV. But the truth of the matter is, when I hear stories about Dr. So-and-so from the 1800s or Betty Jane from the 1700s and these long list of people that used to live there that are spirits of the departed and things like that, do I agree and jive with every single solitary thing that gets said about this? No. Do I necessarily think that every single entity that they encountered in the house was the spirit, the disembodied spirit of a person specifically? No. Do I think that the farmhouse very possibly is a spot where a heightened sense of electromagnetic activity and different phenomena happen and things like that? I certainly think that it's possible. I certainly think that part of it, I would say, is well within the realm of possibility. So, early takes before we get into all of this. You've listened, you've watched, you've read the books, at least insofar as you have. Where are you at when you hear somebody talk about how there's this portal cleverly disguised as a farmhouse? What kind of thoughts are going through your head?
And this case is fascinating from many different, just facets of what's going on here. I've got a young family. Your typical, if you're starting a Hollywood film, it's something a family moves into a new house, and then, oh no, there's hauntings, and oh no, something has happened. So there's a cliche, but there's a cliche for a reason, because a lot of the reports we have go similar cases like this. And then you actually look into what's going on here. You look into the history behind the area, behind some of the alleged spirits, interacting with this family. Go, oh, well, these were real, actual people. How could they have possibly known that? They're not from this town originally. They just show up. And even when we get into our good buddies, Ed and Lorraine Warren, when they come in, it's not like they had these preconceived notions. Well, obviously, it's Bathsheba Sherman. She's the one responsible for this. No, they poured some time and effort into learning what's going on here. So that when the specific question was about the portal idea, I can get behind the idea. I mean, you do your ufological, your cryptozoological, and then paranormal studies, you're going to hear things like flaps. And there are locations that just seem to, for a certain amount of time, or even for a very large amount of time, have oddities occur far more often. And this may very well be one of those places. So I can get behind it. Some of our pro tags here on the Warren side, I'm not the biggest fan of personally, but we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting conversation, because I knew Lorraine, and so but we'll get there. Yeah, so one of the things that always fascinates me about having these kinds of conversations with Christians is the fact that there seems to be this weird dissonance that exists between taking in the realities of, so as Christians, we proclaim an all-knowing creator God who sent in essence a part of himself to fulfill the law that he wrote for his people, which led to this person being born of a virgin, living, dying, and coming back to life. You know what I mean? Like, that's
yeah.
But talking about the fact that there is a different plane of existence, and talking about the potential or the possibility or the experience of the supernatural crossing over with what we call the natural. Then one finally flew over the cuckoo nest. You know what I mean? Like, then it's all, but it's one of those things that it's fun, and it's exciting, and it's thrilling, and it's all of the things, until you mess around and find out. Until you look hard enough in the corners, and you really do search for what goes bump in the night. And friends, seriously, like, this is not, I understand that I normally am the guy doing bits. This is 100% a shoot. You mess around and look for what goes bump in the night long enough, you're going to find the thing that goes bump in the night. I'm just saying, take it from personal experience. So these kinds of stories, especially this story in particular, is so fascinating to me, because I do believe that if you are talking about electromagnetic frequencies being disturbed by something, or by an area, or, even if it's just geological, even if it's not supernatural, and you could 100% give a definition for what's happening, I do absolutely believe that there are people that are more susceptible to feeling those things, and thus, if you reintroduce the supernatural component, that there would be people that would be more susceptible to experiencing those things. Again, it's kind of like passing things through a strainer. You're not going to take every single thing that somebody else says about these things, because the reality is, the reason why in today's world that we tell ghost stories for the most part is to try and make money from our ghost stories. That's just the reality of it. And so do I think that everybody stands to make money if the story is good enough? Absolutely. But I also think that even in the most sensationalized story, there's a kernel of truth.
Yeah, this story is asking a lot of us as a
Yeah.
listener. This is asking you to believe in a supernatural. That's already a step
Yep.
too far for some people. Then it's asking you to believe in ghosts. Then it's asking you to believe in exorcisms. Then it's asking you to believe in, can these disembodied spirits last as long as they do? Can they interact with the physical realm? Well, how is that possible? How does that energy work? And then it also asks you, well, why didn't the family just leave? What? All these different things that are being, why didn't they do this? Or why do I have to believe this in just one incident?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not even so. So to give you an idea, for those of you that have never watched it, The Conjuring is 2 hours and change, give or take, and it centers around solidly one specific experience that we will touch on, but there is a decade of experiences. There were 3 books that were written about this in comparison to the one movie. And so yeah, absolutely, this story requires a lot of the listener, because it is the story of a family enduring something at a place that is beyond all of them. And so that's where, when you get to um the books, in comparison to, like, when you focus in on the books, they're not necessarily trying to specifically tell a ghost story. They tell a lot of encounters that the family goes through and depicts certain events. That being said, though, it's not expressly a horror story. Expressly, it's the story of the Perron family that for a decade was enduring these things, doesn't shy away from the things that happen, but it's not the highlight. And so when you're talking about The Conjuring, it needs to have a main crux. It needs to have a protagonist, because this is the beginning of a franchise. And the whole time, it is supposed to be about this couple that just so happens to be addressing a specific case that is within their catalog of experience. And so in the books and in the speaking arrangements that Andrea and some of the other sisters and even the father have done, they talk about certain instances where they interacted with a particular spirit, and it was sometimes more harmful in nature or scarier or something along those lines. Other times it was just a spirit that was trying to communicate something to the living, almost like it was like a paranormal way station, where because of the nature of it being a portal. That's the crux. So if you go into this looking for specifically the juxtaposition of the accounts of the farmhouse and the seance and all of that sort of stuff versus the accounts of the exorcism, that's not necessarily what you're going to find. But as it relates to what in the movie was the exorcism, that scene actually plays out a lot differently in the books and speaks to some of exposing the reality of Ed and Lorraine, where they invited a medium in that was supposed to come in and engage with the spirits, simple seance, the whole 9 yards. The dad is not at all okay with anything that's going on. So the medium invites dangerous energies into the house that result in a violent attack on Andrea's mother. So this is where that scene from the movie, for those of you that are that are familiar with the movie, this is where this is pulling from. But Andrea talks about this attack in a way that she's thrown hither and throw. She is like, she is strapped down to this chair and basically dumped onto her head while still being attached to like, it's nuts that she survived this, if that's exactly how it all went down. Now, for some of you, this may be the point where you roll your eyes and say, well, of course, but the event was not recorded, as the cameras and audio equipment were destroyed or malfunctioned during the seance. The seance even saw Mr. Perron deck Ed Warren and for his involvement in the whole thing and just pushing the whole situation. So for those of you that are skeptical, that would love to know why it seems like in every single situation like this, oh, the camera didn't work, oh, the recorder did this, oh, this electric device did this, because the idea is that there are fluctuations and changes in the electromagnetic spectrum around the manifestation of something that's paranormal. So the idea is that it's drawing energy from the ambient air and utilizing that energy to bolster its strength to be able to manifest more clearly in a full-born apparition or event or something along those lines. Again, fine-tooth strainer, but this is the idea behind the whole concept of why there's why paranormal activity seems to register or break devices or different things like that.
Yeah. And the idea too of it needs to draw energy for something. Well, however the heck this thing worked with our material plane, as it were. What are the rules? How does that come into being? This could be an explanation for how, in that what has to draw it from somewhere else. And electricity is power here. Well, maybe there's some supernatural equivalent there we just don't understand. Honestly, because we haven't studied it enough, or we're just not technologically able enough to do it. Or even if we bring the technology there, as we see, it just doesn't work in the presence of things like this. Now, do I 100% believe that idea? Not really, but I can get behind the concept of it takes energy to manifest into, so you can interact with a plane of existence you no longer belong to.
Yeah, I think whether we realize it or not, the Judeo-Christian concept of a heaven and hell that is above and below has become pervasive in culture. Just whether or not we realize it or not, this idea of an ascension or a descension is kind of pivotal to conceptualizing interactions with the with the paranormal, with the here other, all of that sort of stuff. But I don't know as though I'm not sold on every single bit of everything that's been said, because the entertainment factor of it relies on every single attempt providing some measurable source of exposure to the supernatural, because that's so dependent. What I hate to burst anybody's bubble, but most of what's happens on TV shows, and I only say most because I'm trying to be charitable, is fabricated, is light and magic, and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. That being said, quantum physics would like a word. There's a lot of theoretical data that we have had for a long while, predating anything that was like mainstream about the paranormal or anything like that, that at the very least doesn't debunk this notion, and in often cases supports the notion of a multiplicity of dimensional realms, for lack of a better word. I don't like that word, because that's, again, that elicits something that makes people think of of sci-fi and stuff like that. But the idea is that if one plane of existence at a certain frequency exists, then it is quite possible that another plane of existence at a different frequency would also exist.
Yes. And those more highfalutin scientific ideas aren't my bag, but I'm glad to be around someone who does understand them a bit more. So thank you, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. So now is where we get into the folks that are at the center of the Conjuring. The Conjuring universe is essentially religious superpowers that are centered around two folks that are just God's righteous left and right hand.
The Christian Avengers.
The Christian Avengers. There we go. You joke, but I am certain for anybody who has seen that universe with all of the little offshoots with the nun and the I 1000% believe we are building to the Christian Avengers. Everybody's going to come together for one big team up. It's happening. Anyway, so on the screen, you have the real life Ed and Lorraine Warren. And let me tell you what. Lorraine is the grandmother you wish you had. Honestly, she was such a sweet woman who was genuinely very kind. She seemed like she was always very excited to be involved. And so I knew her under the context of being a part of one of the larger paranormal groups of the early to mid 2000s. At our height, there was not free from controversy, but certainly well known. And so I was steeped in the culture. And so for me, meeting her at the time that I met her was like meeting a celebrity. And this was before I finally took the big old dose of cough syrup that said what I actually think of Ed and Lorraine, especially as time goes on. From what I hear, Ed was a serious guy, but a nice guy. I did not get, he passed away the year before I first met Lorraine. So, but those two are, for those who are unaware, these two are the preeminent names. When you talk about paranormal research and you talk about demonology, Ed was a self-proclaimed demonologist. At the height of my experience and involvement in all of it, I also called myself a demonologist, which was hilarious because I had a paper relationship with God in the first place, but I fancied myself a demonologist again. And then I stuck my hand in the cookie jar and a snake was in the cookie jar. And then I stopped calling myself a demonologist. Anyway, we'll talk about that at some point, I am sure, but not right now. So a lot of people have come forward since and I should say, so Ed passed away and then Lorraine passed away a couple of years ago.
Yes.
And so we have during the back nine of their lives and specifically Lorraine's life, with the advent of YouTube and the advent of mass dissemination of information in a large scale sense with the internet, these two came under a whole new type of fire. These two have always been a source of controversy. You've always had your people who claim that these two are well-meaning people that sometimes didn't get it right, to people that are doing this righteous work of God, to two people who just inflammatorily preyed upon people and made things up. So walking into this, I'm curious, Christian, how much did you like? What was your opinion of Ed and Lorraine, and how much has their involvement shaded how you look at this case?
I knew them from prior research, Amityville, um, Enfield Poltergeist. So I hadn't gotten to this case until a couple of years ago for the first time. Which, when it comes to like studying this stuff, I've always been more of a cryptozoology kind of guy, and then it probably goes cryptozoology, paranormal, ufology. So, and my paranormal stuff, I don't really go to ghosts that much. It's more like psychics and telekinesis and stuff like that. So I didn't really research too much on this. So looking them up for the first time, I said, "Oh, these nice people, they're coming in, they're trying to give answers to things. They're like a modern day Charles Fort." And I'm a huge Fort guy, not in much that I agree with everything he said, but like, hey, at least I'm offering an answer kind of thing. And then they come in here and they're not even asking money to do what they're doing. To say, hey, which rights to like books and movies and stuff, which, hey, yeah, there's a trade-off there. It's not like they're charging families for exorcisms and stuff like that. And the whole thing too, it's a very noble, like, oh, we can't do the exorcisms ourselves. We have to actually get the Catholic Church involved. And then you get into a little more and go, well, this is very carefully cultivated, these backstories and their what they want. And is Lorraine actually psychic? And I'd argue maybe she has a touch of it, because I do believe in psychics. To the extent that people can feel traces of things left behind and stuff like that, maybe even read minds, whatever. But then you just listen to what they say. And one of my favorite things in debates in general, as I've grown older, is not even arguing my point that much.
Yeah. Letting the other person punch himself out.
Yes, I just like letting other people talk. Yeah. And yeah, we were talking the other day about Art Bell, and because I'm fairly new to that, because I always heard the name. And I've been listening to some of his old stuff they're uploading on podcast form, and be like, man, I wish he would push back more. But at the same time, he agrees a little too much with them for my taste. But one of his greatest strengths and one of his greatest weaknesses is he just lets people speak. So for me, listening to someone say something outrageous, it's like, well, I've got this map here and it's showing the world after the sinking happens, Lemuria is going to come back, and I go, yeah, just keep talking. I don't have to listen to anything you have to say now because you're crazy. But for them specifically, I see a bunch of shystas who think they're doing good in the world.
Yeah.
I think their idea of like, hey, there are paranormal things happening in the world. We need to research them. We need to document them. I am right there with you. If we don't let it happen, we're going to learn from nothing, because, well, we'll have stories like, your Bell Witch, which is kind of like, this is more modern take on that whole story of the, family suffering from a crisis. It was more poltergeisty for Bell Witch, but you understand what I mean. Yeah, we need to research those things. We need to develop those things. So I am behind someone willing to go into part and say, okay, what's happening? Who do we need to get involved? How do we stop this? Good. But it's when you get the embellishments coming in, or you have a quote there I'm going to let you use for how certain stories were told to hype up interest in them. And that's when I start getting a little angry from the research side of things, because you have a solid story here that is, to me, very believable. And showing my cards on the table here, I kind of believe in the story. Not in a, I want to believe Mulder sense, but like I kind of see evidence and it says, okay, push me in that direction. But you get people saying, well, say this happened instead, or spice things up a little bit more. Yeah. And so an interview one time you say this, and an interview another time you say something else, and that it could be false memory or something like that. It happens to every one of us. I'm definitely not free from that. My memory is abysmal. We've talked about it before. Eyewitness testimony, not the best thing in the world, but it's when you notice the slip ups and there's not a correction. It's like, oh, that was me. It was stupid. No, to just keep on going. I have a huge issue with that. So my reaction to them is mixed. I'll put it that way. In that, yes, research, look into these things, let the public know about them so we can wrestle with these concepts. But then also quit making stuff up, because that ruins your credibility. And people do that all the time. You look in different cases all over and say, well, I saw Bigfoot one time, or I saw this UFO, and like maybe they legitimately saw it, but then they start getting the attention, so they fake it after that. So that puts the first report under immense credulity. It's like, I don't know now, because you faked it.
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's part of why part of what you're talking about there is part of why I'm always slow to bring in the name of the group that I was a part of and that I spun off from, because like was the case with most of the folks that got involved, there were many of folk that really, it would seem like they started off with a genuine desire to explain the unexplainable or to explore the supernatural, or at least a belief that it exists. And then a little bit of fame hits and realizing that ghost stories sell, they always have. And next thing maybe it happened a little bit like this, maybe it happened a little bit like that. I have gone back and forth as far as these two go. When I first really was confronted with some of the stuff that came out about these two, I was furious because I cared deeply about the field. I cared deeply about the idea of, it wasn't even about the idea of proving the existence of God. It was more about producing or proving the existence of something else, something outside of, I've never really dug the idea of we sit on this earth, we sit on this spinning rock for anywhere between 60 to 90 years and just slog through it and all that sort of stuff just to have our meat sacks deteriorate. I've never really dug that. And I think over time I've experienced enough that would obviously lean me away from thinking that sort of thing. But even at a younger age, understanding that some of the preeminent voices being pulled out into the village square and publicly discredited sucks in trying to actually turn around and say it's no different than us as Christians, and other
Absolutely.
Christians act a fool and all of that. And you got to like, yeah, don't pay attention to them just because there are bad actors in the whole thing. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so with these two, I want to believe that they started off with good intentions, and then it got away from them, because the idea is we're not gonna, at a time where people like Art Bell Coast to Coast were a big deal because they were actually letting people tell their stories and wasn't charging them for telling their stories. You had other people who were mediums and psychics and clairvoyants and palm readers and all of these people that everybody said, okay, I will give you access to the paranormal. And then with their hand out, like, okay, $19.95, please, plus tax. And so to have these two then say on the front end, you owe us nothing, but on the back end, we retain rights and likeness and all of that sort of stuff to be able to tell your story and all of that sort of stuff, knowing that, yeah, okay, we're going to do all of this stuff, but then we're going to write a book about it, all in the name of raising awareness, but also understanding that every single time somebody buys that book, the cash register goes off and there's more money in your pocket and all of that sort of stuff. It's the idea of why anybody would use personal experience to fuel a literary project or movies or something along those lines. So even that far, I wouldn't necessarily start to really give them a hard time yet, because there's the capitalist in me understands that the market is what it is, and just because somebody's engaging with it doesn't make it a wrong thing. But when you're utilizing that market space to take advantage of other people in any way, shape, or form, you've lost me. I don't dig it anymore. I've got a problem with that, because now you're taking advantage of people utilizing this market and all of that sort of stuff. And so you have these two that I really do fundamentally believe started off with good intentions, and then realizing juicy stories sell. Stories like Amityville are cash cows, so let's make everything the next Amityville.
Mhm.
and keep pumping out these stories that we can keep selling and all of that sort of stuff. And eventually you get to situations like where Ed was quoted saying, in the preparation for telling this story, make it up and make it scary.
Yeesh.
You know, it wasn't the idea that the entire thing was fabricated, but
Mhm.
it's this idea that, the specific situation was that the story didn't really have a capstone moment, because oftentimes a lot of these paranormal stories don't have some climactic good and evil sort of situation. The case that drove me out of it ended with the family cheesing it and whatever was there not following them. There was no resolution, and you couldn't pay me enough money to step foot back in that house again for the rest of my life. I would turn down millions at this point than that rather than step foot back in that house. But there was no clean break. And so Ed was presented with this story that didn't necessarily have a clean break, and he was exposed to have been said, make it up and make it scary. Um, even Lorraine, as in in her last years after the Conjuring came out, she in am I
There we go.
here? I
Okay, I
am
can hear you
back.
now. Yeah,
Okay,
was that
fantastic.
you or me? Who knows? It
Who
wouldn't
knows?
be an SG production without something going wrong technologically. So,
Yep.
I lost you about 3 to 4 minutes in, I think.
Yeah.
So,
So essentially you've got these situations that you step into a dynamic. There is no clean ending to it, and understanding that your story needs a clean ending, you open the door for stuff like that to happen. Even Lorraine, who in the last years of her life, because of the Conjuring, because of their godson John Zaffis's movie or TV show getting popular, and thus them getting thrust back into the limelight and all of that, she had a lot of speaking engagements towards the last part of her life, and she was asked a lot about what about these claims about the embellishment and all of that sort of stuff. And she would always, ever since the Conjuring came out, would turn it on the Conjuring specifically, and basically turn it on to James Gunn, where James Gunn, his
Juan.
responsibility is to tell us James Wan. Yeah, James Wan. But his job is to tell the story and all of that sort of stuff, and basically keep thrusting it on the movies and why the movies aren't necessarily accurate, and kind of evaded the idea of what they did and said being off from center. So if they actually if they, in my opinion, they either 100% believed at least at the beginning of what they were doing, or these two committed to the bit flawlessly, then people need to analyze them and their history as a means for understanding how people can be pathological liars, and in even with the cameras in front of their face. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there was never really a breaking of the bit in a public fashion, like, because information became disseminable. That's what got them tripped up. But at the time in which they were the most active, that wasn't the case. And so saying something behind closed doors didn't have the same ramifications as it does today.
Yes. Didn't have to watch what you're saying as much. I mean, especially in our more technological age, it's a lot easier for someone to just video you saying whatever, and then it gets out. And for them, better or worse, it happened.
Yeah. Yeah. So, in a nutshell, the idea here is that the Warrens, when they were involved with the Perron family, were just kind of came in and thrust themselves onto the situation, um were ill-equipped to actually be effective in this situation, and basically only really were around long enough to be able to get access to their story and to be able to sell their story on after the fact. She can one of the more gracious things that I experienced when talking to Andrea was the fact that she understood the position that Lorraine was put into with Ed being gone and her being so dedicated to Ed, which she was Ed was her partner in every sense of the word. Like it so exuded from her when she spoke of him and all of that sort of stuff. That the idea here is, she got, he passed away, and now this entire empire is resting on her shoulders. And so she chose to back her husband and everything that he said publicly and everything that they had built and all of that sort of stuff. She also was put into a situation where the Hollywood studios had carte blanche freedom in certain regards to take that story and make changes that were suitable for the movie and for it, beyond just the bombastic nature of the Warrens being the conquering heroes and all of that sort of stuff, and this random intersection of other cases that needed to be mentioned because of the movie and all of that sort of stuff, even down to details about the family. They had the ability to be able to go in and change all of these things that weren't necessarily decisions that lived and died on the shoulders of Lorraine. It's just a bad look when you're already being publicly accused of being full of it, to be caught up in a situation where a Hollywood studio is taking somebody's story and manipulating the details.
Yeah. It doesn't help too. Like Andrea mentioned, it's like they just show up. This is like one of the first cases they're on. They're bungling their way through it. They seem to make things worse in how they're reacting to the spirits. You got the whole medium incident that happens as well. And me, armchair quarterback here, looking from things from a Christian perspective, going, that was your best plan. That's what you're doing. Willingly getting involved in things are forbidden by what we believe in. So then when things go, bump in the night after that, I hate the victim blame, but it's your fault that it's happening to people who didn't ask for this, if that is what actually happened. So that's another thing that kind of irks me about them, is the whole, well, we really respect Catholicism, we really respect the whole hierarchy of things, of how you're supposed to do exorcisms. And the Catholic Church's view of exorcism and my view of exorcism, two very different things. I look at scripture, it's very like one of the most anticlimactic things in the world. Get out, and they get out, instead of these week-long, month-long procedures that really at the end of the day kind of make me question, which I really shouldn't do, someone else's faith. And there's events like that. So all that to say, what was I going with that? Who knows? I'm getting old. That early onset Alzheimer's hits pretty hard.
Yeah. It's it's a weird thing because on one hand, it's easy to armchair quarterback these things. In the heat of the moment, it can get wilding out. And I guess the only thing that I would push back a little bit on what you said, even though largely the spirit behind what you're saying, I totally vibe with, but there is a level to it where you did see examples from scripture where folks struggled with certain types of demonic forces.
Yes.
Now, I think that more than just demons exist in terms of spiritual entities. I think the Bible speaks to that. I think that's very clear. Now, I would caution anybody, don't go running around investigating these things. It may seem fun. It may seem like a good time. Here's the issue, though. You open up the door and you say, I want so-and-so to come through. Now, again, your mileage may vary on what you believe is possible with opening that door and who can actually come through that door. But regardless, you have no actual proof of who you are saying is coming through that door is actually who's there or what is there. And that's my biggest thing. Like, that's my, like, whether or not your great Aunt Betsy is coming from beyond the grave to have a conversation with you, I don't know about all that, but I do know about things like, well, if we to go back to the quantum theory of it all, if we're looking at people in terms of energy and we understand that our energy is produced by us over time, that is processed through human faculties like sight and sound and smell and touch, and we are in a spot over and over and over again, the idea of almost like an energy shadow being in that place, well, that's different than the actual spirit of the person being there. So there's that end of it. But then you also have this thing of entities that will lie to you, like not tell you the truth and tell you that they are your great Aunt Betsy or whatever, your dearly departed, cousin or whatever like that. You know what I mean? So messing around and saying, let me just throw this door wide open is not cool. And honestly, that's part of why even like why at this point in my life I would never call myself a demonologist. For a lot of reasons I would never call myself a demonologist, but one of them being that even if I were to study demonology in its sense, I do not agree with the office of demonologist because I do not agree with the sensationalized version of exorcism in the very standard sense that movies and stories that are centered around a Judeo-Christian perspective would have you believe that it's this big climactic moment in this battle of wills. Do I think that there is a push and a pull to the cosmic and to the spiritual and all of that sort of stuff? Absolutely, without a doubt. But that being said, I think there's a very fine line when we're looking at the realities of what is real about all of this and what is not real about all of this. And that's why it frustrates me when you go too far down this rabbit hole of the media version of all of it, because don't get me wrong, I love a good paranormal horror movie. It doesn't even need to be a Christian one. It Lives Inside is a Hindu horror movie that came out last year. Amazing. Absolutely, and plays it straight down the middle, like that, like as if as if for every single movie that we have heard about demons, it plays it the exact same way. So it doesn't even need to be about a Christian version of the whole thing for it to be interesting to me. But that being said, when you look at the reality of all of this, and you look at these cases, and you listen to the stories of the people who actually experience these things, you've got a whole family of people that aren't actually being taken seriously because you have two people that stepped into the situation and over embellished the entire thing and threw the door open and said, hey, we know what we're doing, so we're going to step in here, but we're yielding to the Catholic Church, so it's all okay. And we're throwing that thing open and saying, come what may, because we can handle it. Well, oops, unfortunately, you got caught with your pants around your ankles because you weren't actually ready for what decided to pop its way out of the friggin' door. And it's and so many people have gotten wrapped up getting hurt by this, not just from Ed and Lorraine, but people going off half-cocked into these areas that just bad juju happens on a regular basis. And we want to screw around at 3:00 in the morning to try and figure out what. And don't get me wrong, again, I was one of those people screwing around at 3:00 in the morning in places that I shouldn't have been messing around in. But when you try to actually take the realities of all of this, that's why it's good to be able to, even if you don't agree with everything that she says, take in the personal accounts. If you're going to study the paranormal, take in the personal accounts, because it grounds you. It keeps your feet on the ground that there are people that are involved in this. My first example of the one that really turned me on to the idea that there are people behind this was the Annalise Michelle case. For those of you that don't know, the exorcism of Emily Rose is based on a young woman named Annalise Michelle who lived in the early 1900s, I believe. I don't remember right off the top of my head.
1960s or 70s, and was it West Germany?
Was it the 60s? Okay, I thought it was earlier than that. But anyway, very, very famous possession case. Very, very famous case that in a 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of way, had Ed involved, which I should have put that together. But yeah, had Ed involved that with one of the situations that she was in. And to hear the actual recordings, whether you believe in it or not, is not actually the main point. But to understand that there are people involved in the whole thing, that's really where it becomes, for lack of a better phrase, that's where it comes alive. That's where it actually, the meaning and significance of the situation comes into play. And so, yes, I do, because I have sat across from people who are at wit's end because of the things that are going on, or I have seen the ravaging effects of undocumented, untreated mental illness, and how that can manifest itself in paranormal activity, that it's hard for me to get behind folks that use this as a means to make a buck and to really support that at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Since Joe mentioned the film that just came out about exorcism, that it's not American based, I'm going to mention Exhuma, South Korean film, was really pretty dang good. Came out earlier this year. But yeah, I am 100% in your corner on this. I am so sick and tired of what ghost shows have become these days. Where you at, bro? Come out, bro. What you going to do? You going to hurt me, bro? It's like, that's not really that much of an over-exaggeration, but it's like, okay.
It's really not. That's the sad part.
Let's build this scenario real quick. You're in a place purported to be haunted. Ghosts, demons, whatever. You know, electromagnetic frequencies from another universe, whatever. Your best plan to interact with them is to provoke them, is to not reach out and say, hey, what's going on here? Is there anything we can do to help? Yeah, that may seem a little naive or whatever, but like comparing the two, I'm going to choose to, if I'm actually talking with this, when there's an argument to make, is that mediumship? I would argue not really, but I can definitely see where someone, their personal conviction would say you should never do that.
Yeah.
But you brought up a really important point. The human element. These people exist. They have social security cards. They have friends. They have families. They are being afflicted by something. It could be mental illness. It could be demonic oppression, possession. It could be, the energies from this universe are messed up for a moment in time, and they're just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Well, regardless, why aren't they the focus of what you're doing? Someone is being hurt, and that's whole gospel message. Love others, you treat others, you've been treated, love God, and all that mess. There you go. There's your mic drop. There's the entire Bible in 2 words. There's 2 sentences.
Yeah. There you go.
But not everyone thinks that way.
Right.
But I still can't think of, logically, when someone says, hey, where you at, ghost? Where you at, demon? Come at me, bro. It's like, or I'm going to come in here. It's like, well, I'm going to do the exorcism myself. And I have very dubious ties to the Catholic Church. And I'm probably not the best person for this. And as I said earlier, I should be better about this, wondering about someone else's faith. I can only really know about my own. I don't think Ed and Lorraine were, but I think they were part of the culture and thought that they could. And as a result, that got into their heads, along with other things that got into their heads, the dollar signs, the fame, the fortune, that made them do things like this, that provoked these entities so that there would be documented things that they could show, or even say, hey, everything got broken because of the documented things that were forced into being because we provoked these things instead of getting rid of these things. So I'm a little heated right now. So go ahead.
Yeah, that's so, and that's part of the issue, that when you look at the actual office of demonologist or the actual office of exorcist, it because of the idea of the Catholic Church being the one true church and all of that sort of stuff, and that belief system and everything that stems from that, those being recognized offices is whatever. That's the idea, and why somebody would look to an actually sanctioned exorcist, even though something like that was not actually biblical. That's not the template. That's not the template for it. And again, I've said this before and I'll say it again. We are not warned against alternative spiritual forces because they're fake. It doesn't say don't mess with this stuff because it's not real. It just says don't mess with this stuff. You know what I mean? And that's the reality of, like, okay, so I will never forget. So I'm in, it was after it was the first time that I was in that house. I went through 3 different teams in the last house that I investigated in, where all hell broke loose. 3 different teams. I remember the first time we showed up there, we were screwing around. It was all fun and games. We're rolling up, blaring the Ghostbusters theme and the whole 9 yards, and we're all having a good time and all of this sort of stuff. And so ignorant of what would come next. And then I, in all of my bravado and being in my early 20s, fancied myself strong enough in my faith, which again, laughable, that to be able to say that I will cleanse this house. I will clear what and all of this sort of stuff. And I'm going where we packed up our gear after everything went down, and I'm giving one of my team members a ride home, and I'm watching as she keeps looking in my rearview mirror, and she finally looks at me and goes, okay, there's something sitting in your backseat. And bro, you want to talk about your blood running cold? Like, that was just, that freaked me out. And what happened next is a story for another time, but it's it's one of those things that when you've seen enough and experienced enough, it becomes more frustrating when you find the people that are just looking to make money off of it or to make a spectacle out of it or things like that. Because it always makes it that much harder for a person who is trying to convey the realities of this to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And not to mention, we have an American spirituality that struggles with the idea of acknowledging the reality of anything outside of God. Like we are very selective with what we allow to be mentioned outside of God. So I just think that sort of thing kind of stunts the conversation, on top of just having people that are just all over wanting to sensationalize it.
When I had my experience, which we're going to be talking about later, I was outraged by how many people said that, number one, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And number two, because it was, well, don't talk about it to anyone else.
Yep.
I was like, no, but we say we believe the things in this book, right? We say, there's this God out there. He loves us. He protects us, but he allows us to live in a fallen world to, one day, hopefully get back to him if we repent, blah, blah, blah. But that part of that book too, is that there are angels out there, watching over us, guardian angels. How does that work? That's a discussion for another time. But there's also these entities called demons. There's ghosts. There's other things that you see in scripture, and you go, how are you, especially you inerrant people like me, going to pick and choose, inerrant and infallible, what you believe and what you don't believe, when you're going to say everything in here is true and real? The flowery language stuff, the metaphors, that's its own thing, but the actual events, how are you going to say that? And that's one of those things that made me really think about this issue of the supernatural, not really for the first time, but like in a more serious fashion. Number one, it happened to me, so obviously it's going to make it more personal, but it was the reactions to it that really, there was no other way to say it. I was pissed off by certain people I once trusted because of how they reacted to it. And the church has done a terrible job of actually confronting these things, instead of it's just suppressing. I'm not saying every church does this, but most would be like, well, we'll talk about Jesus. We'll talk about, you've been baptized by the Holy Spirit. It's a wonderful thing, but we're not going to talk about somebody who's been demonically oppressed. Or people have the wrong terms. They have the wrong terms. They think if you're attacked by a demon, that means possession.
Right.
Go ahead, Joe.
Right. Yeah. The fact that there's a difference between oppression and possession, and the fact that there are really two mainline denominations that openly discuss this sort of thing. And one of them believes that it's all segmented, and the other one believes that everything that plagues us is a spirit. And so from the world, it is one of those things that becomes very easily skewed or conflated, or it has this way of going off the rails a lot of the time without being able to have educated conversation about the potential for these things to take place. Because if we cannot have that conversation, then we cannot actually seek to understand anything about the supernatural, and we then are classifying a whole group of people to be full of crap. That's the reality. We can't, if we say the whole thing is garbage, then we say full tilt that everybody who says that they've had an experience is lying.
Mm-hmm.
So
how are they going to respond to that?
Right.
Do you think they're going to come to church on Sunday?
Yeah. I think there's a healthy amount of fear around it, but there is a level where you can have a healthy amount of fear around it. but like a fear that keeps you sharp, a fear that keeps you aware, a fear that says, hey, I'm not going to go outside of my depth about this whole thing. But the answer isn't to stick your head in the sand and not acknowledge it in any way, shape, or form.
Yes.
So, one of the biggest differences that, actually, one of the biggest things that Andrea was very, very offended by, and one of the things that dominated the sense of the conversation when her and I spoke a couple of years ago. So my wife and I have interviewed her. Her number has been in my phone for some time, and we've had conversations throughout the years. And there are a couple of things that are of note. Not a lick, not a single word of her story has changed over the years. It has not. And that is in direct contrast to many of the folks that are within the sphere of families that were families that had a case that they were that a movie was made around, or things like that, that have changed up their story, that have been caught in a lie, all in the name of trying to make a buck. Andrea has largely kept to her story, but one of the things that she was the most offended by was the fact that the movie very much makes her family out to be godless heathens, very much atheistic in nature, because then the white saviors needed to come in and save them. Yes, everybody in this movie is white, but again, it doesn't, they're just, Ed and Lorraine are coded to being white saviors in the things that they do and in these movies. And so that was very much what the whole thing centered around in the movie. It drove the entirety of the plot forward, that they're exposed to, maybe these things are real, when in all actuality they're very Catholic. And so this idea of these things being possible was already on the table. But then she actually stepped away from Catholicism and talked about how she felt like it was left largely insufficient to describe what she had learned about the nature of experience, which is funny to me, because as somebody who, I welcome all of my denominational brothers and sisters, especially others within the pulpit. I think we need each other. I think as pastors and preachers and workers within ministry, I think we desperately and seriously need to have each other's backs. So my arms are wide open to all of our denominational brothers and sisters. This is not a dig on a specific denomination or anything else like that, but I also find Catholicism to be largely wanting, because so much of it, especially most of the time, the flavor of it that you're going to get is Roman Catholicism, and it's very much built on power dynamics, not the ancient nature of the church. So some Catholic churches are not built around the power dynamic, but all in all, that specific denomination and the way that they present everything and the way that they believe in everything does leave something wanting, in my opinion. It leaves certain things off the table, and it's not like I think that another denomination does it better. It's just that specifically I find it interesting that multiple roads make it back to this idea that a particular denomination is not sufficient to explain the complexities of spiritual existence.
Yeah, I have my own issues with the Catholic Church, but it's not one of those. We've left the 1500s behind. I think some reforms have been made that needed to be made within the Catholic Church, and I believe they're my brothers and sisters. So, but also one of those things that I'm weirdly, if there's such a thing as spiritual envy, the hierarchy is one of the things I want and I also hate at the same time, because of what it can cause. But also is that the ideal of it is someone to report to. That's their job. They're supposed to be in charge of this diocese or whatever. But it can easily lead to corruption. It can easily lead to people not understanding what they're supposed to do below, because the people above aren't doing their job. So, yeah, love my Catholic brethren, but I have issues. Imagine that. I'm a Protestant.
Yeah. And so that was like, of all of the things, she was fine with the idea of, you embellish certain situations. Yes, she would talk about the situation with the medium and the seance and how that exorcism never actually happened, that they showcase in the movie, that wasn't how it all went down. But it was that piece about displaying them as non-religious that she really was very offended by,
because it's so blatantly done. It's like
yeah.
it's set up in a way to make white savior is a pretty good way of putting it, but also just so preachy. Be like, oh, were your children baptized? That's a roundabout way of saying, oh, are you people good? Do you know the Lord? And it's so passive aggressive. It makes the family look like a bunch of buffoons, from that Christian Avengers style of, well, if you're on our team, these things wouldn't be happening to you, as if no Christian family has ever been oppressed by demonic activity at any point in time in history. It's not like, Jesus himself fought Satan, at the very beginning of his ministry, God forbid we suffer what he had to suffer through.
Yeah, exactly. And that's so when you look at the experience of somebody who lived in that for over a decade, and you see the fact that she doesn't like the word haunted because she thinks that that's inherently negative, that she views it more as like a shared space that she had with the spirits and things like that. I find that fascinating. And the idea of prolonged exposure to that sort of setting at a young age, what that does to your awareness or opinion or thoughts on the supernatural. Because I think one of the biggest things that one of the biggest flaws that I see with Western evangelicalism is it's so sanitized of the idea of the supernatural. It's so sanitized of the idea and depths of the interaction between the natural and the supernatural, and the fact that there is no supernatural to God. There is no extension of reality to God. It is all reality to God. And that whole concept of trying to draw these lines in very specific ways that discredit this or prove this or do that, and I think it's interesting to see how that shapes somebody in walking through life, because she's another one that either she fundamentally believes everything that she is talking about, or she has committed wholly and completely to the bit. You know what I mean? Because so much of her story has not changed over the years, and you can just tell when a person is and this is where it comes in about a person either being so honest or so pathological because of the fluidity in which things are being discussed and brought up. And so when you see this, and then it also asks questions of, what do we really understand to be the depths of the supernatural when you talk about all of these different spirits and entities that she mentions having engaged with over the years?
Yeah. And humans are inherently just liars. It's just part of our fallen race, blah, blah, blah. So it's difficult to trust a fantastical story like this. It's outside the norm because it's difficult to trust people when they tell you regular stories anyways. So some outrageous claims have been made here. That means they're under scrutiny. You know what else has made some outrageous claims that needs to be put under scrutiny? The Bible. We talked a little bit about it earlier. I every now and then drink the blood and, the flesh of my Savior every now and then. My best friend was born in the manger way back when. When you look at that from an outsider's perspective, of course it looks weird, because it is weird to the world. And it's only normal to me because I've been in it for a long time and I've experienced it. So I have not experienced what she went through. So I give a little bit of grace. I give a little, okay, let's hear what she actually has to say. And at the end of the day, like I said earlier, I tend to believe her for the most part.
Yeah. So, couple of rapid fire experiences that she talks about in the book that did not make it to the movie. We've got the Scottish spirit, a threatening spirit that spoke with a deep Scottish brogue and used archaic language not common even in the 1800s. The spirit seemed to have a hostile presence and threatened Mrs. Perron, expressing disdain for her presence in the house. We have the spirit of a young boy named Oliver Richardson, who died around the age of 5 or 6, made contact with the Perron family. He was also known to one of the daughters, April, and his identity was confirmed through later research about the house's history. We have Abigail Arnold. Abigail identified herself and conveyed a message expressing that the spirits missed the Perron family. Apparently, had reached out to Andrea after the fact, and then we have the antagonist of the movie, Bathsheba Sherman. So
The great Satanist herself.
The great Satanist herself. So here's the issue. One of the biggest mistakes that the Warrens made with this whole case is they didn't realize the longevity of statements made in public, and that electronic records have a way of not forgetting. And they publicly stated that they believed Bathsheba Sherman was the problem in the house. Like in real life, they openly stated that. Now, the issue is that the movie takes complete and total liberty with her story. That she did not live. Yeah, that's a very charitable way of saying it. And they openly backed something that it does not take a whole lot of time to disprove and to be able to poke holes in and all of those kinds of things. It sounds like you've got thoughts.
Yeah. This is one of the things I appreciate about this story from a more skeptical point of view. It's like, how does this family know these names? How did they tie it to this house that they just bought? Did they do their research over time and say, well, we'll add this one to the story? I mean, you could argue that, but like, I mean, it's a lot harder to look up things back in the day than it is now. Like, they could have been pouring something over in the local library or the local academic records, whatever it is, the archives they have, if they even saved those to begin with. So this leads a lot of believability factor to me in that specific names are given, specific times are given. Now, we don't know the Scottish, ghost name and all that, but hey, we have these people were alive at this point in time. They are tied to this house. How could the family know about that off the bat? And yeah, it's one of those things, just looking through this whole ordeal. I'm trying to remember something you said earlier, and it's not coming to me. But yeah, from the Ed and Elaine side of things, all they had to do was do their own research, and they wouldn't have said some dumb things.
Yeah.
So yeah, who's the actual evil spirit here? Kind of hard to tell. And is this actually one of them? I remember what I was going to say. It was, okay, so we've made contact with these things. Well, why should we trust what they have to say? How do I know they are who they claim to be? Because assuming a demonic entity, assuming a spirit of some form, maybe they have some ability to look this stuff up on the ghost internet or whatever. And they can claim to be something else, or maybe they've contacted these spirits, pretend to be them, and we get to some whole different shenanigans and a different franchise like Insidious, but that's its own thing. And where they're pretending to be something they're not.
Yeah.
Like, just, I don't know what I was going to say at the end there. I'm all over the place today.
So and the issue is that so Bathsheba Sherman was tied to the area because there was some controversy about how her kid died and about whether or not
Yes.
there's a child sacrifice and all of that sort of jazz. And but even the details of it that are actually historical, coupled with what this movie accuses her of having done, um at what point are you just defaming somebody for the sake of telling a story? Like, at what point are you just making stuff up all in the name of having a villain, sort of thing, and like just
Yeah.
running somebody through the mud? Now, don't get me wrong. Again, she had controversy in her life. It wasn't like she was known of being a saint or something along those lines. Like, there was actual controversy about whether or not she worshipped Satan and all of that sort of stuff. But it wasn't. She wasn't tied to the house. She wasn't tied to the farmhouse or the family that owned it or any of those sorts of things. And so the conjunction of her being involved in all of this, she showed up on some record someplace and they rolled with it, because the idea was that there was no better definitive name to point to.
Yeah, she's our big bad for the sake of having a big bad for the story that's going to need a
Right.
resolution at some point in time.
Right.
By the way, she was
So,
also acquitted of the
yep.
potential murder. So, interesting.
Yeah.
As far as the law is concerned, she's fine.
Yep. So, with that, we go ahead and head into the wrap up now that we have explored the recesses of this topic. Christian, why don't you go ahead and take us home?
Sure. All right. Plausibility of all. I have put my cards out on the table. I think, for the most part, I am in this story to win it. I think there's an actual haunting of some sorts. Now, we're going to disagree, Andrea and I, on what that actually is, in her ways of all that. But it seems that there were other spirits here. I don't want to throw the demon card out, because when there are Christians who get into stuff like this, like that's their buzzword. It's like anything that is not of God is demonic. So
Right.
I'm going to go spirits. Now, what that actually means, is it possible for a spirit to remain behind on this earth, to not be in judgment like they should be? That's a whole different episode.
Yeah.
So for this, the family, the fact that they haven't changed their story either means they're the greatest collusionists of all time. And I think I made up that word, that they've all come together and said, okay, never break from the story, never break kayfabe. It's kayfabe, right? For wrestling.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not a wrestling fan, you may notice, but I use the terms every now and then incorrectly. So yeah, we're never once going to say anything wrong. They just got an eidetic memory that's always going to tell a story the same way, the same time. I find that very incredulous. Not impossible, but very incredulous. So Ed and Lorraine get involved. We've already discussed them. I don't think that adds anything to the story as far as believability. In case it kind of hinders it in some parts. But as far as the family themselves, what Andrea has to say about what her experiences, I am on her side. Now, her conclusions, not always there with her, but as far as what she experienced, I'm there. How about you, Joe?
I would say it exactly the same. I think some of the conclusions are going to be dependent on your belief systems and all of that sort of stuff. But other than that, I think from a plausibility factor, yeah, I'm there. The idea of a nexus point that has increased activity, yep, that checks out. The idea of multiple entities all in the same place, yep, that checks out. And I do believe that the family experienced things. I believe that they believe everything that has been said to them by spirits. Whether or not that's true, that gets into the details of things that I think are above our pay grade. But the idea of it happening, yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. All right. So as far as the more demonological side of things, paranormal research in general, is there anything you further want to go into your own story of your experiences before I get into mine?
So so the stories that come out from movies would have you believe that as soon as you walk into a place that things are bad. And modern skepticism would say it's all mental illness. And there's a lot of folks in a lot of different camps that step out and say that this is how it is. This is the reality of the matter universally. It's all sunshine and rainbows until you are immediately and violently confronted with something so much bigger than yourself that you fundamentally understand in that moment where you set on the pecking order. That you realize you are woefully unprepared and you just brought a whole team of people into harm's way because of ego, because of lack of understanding, things like that. So the idea of encountering evil happens on a regular basis. We live in the world. So there's an idea of evil that transcends whether or not we come across entities. But just because we can see evil and not come across an entity does not mean that entities in and of themselves do not exist. And so I challenge anybody that wrestles with this. When you hear these stories about when you are there and a woman's secrets are being poured out on the table by another person who they've never met in their entire life, and unless some conversations happened behind closed doors that I knew nothing about, there was never an exchange of this kind of information. And we're talking about like personal secrets. We're not talking about like a person's social security number or their favorite color. Like we're talking about deep secrets. Yeah. When you see things like that happening, when you see the physiological responses of a person under these circumstances and situations, and you realize the things are flying all over the place and all of that sort of stuff, and all of these things are actually happening, it's an entirely different thing that I think the paranormal genre really makes light of in a lot of regards, because in a lot of regards you have folks that will talk about these things like it's a rite of passage to be able to experience these kinds of supernatural events and stuff like that. And I sit here today at a place where those of us that were through that know what we saw and know what we experienced. We know what we got on tape, and we know by speaking to linguistics experts, the languages that were being spoken by the subject of the disturbances and the hauntings and the activity and all of that sort of stuff. Like we have all of the things to corroborate it. So for me, I've lost the idea of needing the credibility given by other people believing your story, because it's just the reality of it. But I sit here today completely cured of any need to step back out and experience those things again. If I never experience another supernatural experience like that again, it will be too soon.
Well said. Me, when it comes to these things, research them. Figure out what's going on. These seem to be aspects of our world that we just don't understand, especially from a more scientific perspective. Now, you could argue all day long it was paranormal, therefore it can never be scientific. We're just going to agree to disagree. We just don't understand it yet. That's why I'm going to put it. Was it Clark Sturd law of magic? Advanced magic is indistinguishable from technology. That's where I'm at, where that stands. And I'm one of those people, I believe we're all psychic to an extent. I think some a little bit more than others. So they're able to pick up on things way better. Some people, they might have telekinesis. They might be able to read minds, whatever. They might have psychometry. But I don't know that for a fact because not enough people have diligently pursued that in a serious scientific way. So on that side of things, I'm very angry at people. On the Christian side of things, I am also very angry with people who, like we discussed earlier, will just say, well, it can't happen because I say so. Or it did, but it was probably your fault it happened. Well, as Joe Story pointed out, a little bit of blame. I think we can throw that way. I think Joe himself would say that. But victim blaming isn't helping the issue. Okay. Well, right. you said it was my fault. Well, by saying that means it happened. So what are you going to do about it? That is a reality in the world now, as your parameters have just established. If you say nothing, then why are we talking? You're missing the point. My personal story, I have two. I'll start with the softer one first. The lighter side of things. When I was about 18 months old, I was in a shopping mall back when those still existed with my mother and grandparents, and they were looking at a clothing store. I was a boy that didn't, do anything for me. So while their backs were turned, I went elsewhere. They looked around, where the heck did Christian go? And they saw me by a fountain that, shopping malls used to have. And there was an older man watching over me, making sure I wasn't falling there. And so they ran over to grab me. The person behind the counter, the cashier, was doing the same. And when my grandfather went to go thank the man, he was gone. Like, no time for an exit. It was a very Batman Commissioner Gordon kind of way of being there than not being there. My mother to this day will swear that I was an angel. I was 18 months old. I can neither confirm nor deny. My memory has always been bad, and I definitely wouldn't have been formed at that part of my life. Now, the bad side of things, I say bad as in like it ended up being positive. Right after I graduated college, I was about to leave my roommates behind to start being the roommate of a guy I was at work with who had just come to faith, who had come from a very rough lifestyle. I think you and he would get along quite well, Joe. And he needed guidance, and that was one of the reasons why I was going to be his roommate. And part of this is me kind of saying, well, maybe that's why this happened, but we'll see. So I am a very paranoid person by nature. I like my doors. I make sure there's no one in my room. I never leave the shower curtain, all the way up because there could be a murderer behind there. I'd rather not relive the moments of Psycho. That's me. So my door to the room in the 3-room apartment was locked. The door outside was locked. I had asked a friend if I could borrow his Game of Thrones season 1 DVD to watch it for the first time. I fell asleep watching it. I woke up later that night, pitch black, except for the TV running. I think it was like the 4th episode of the season. And when I woke up and started moving around under the covers, I felt a presence in the room with me. And I felt that whatever this thing was hated me. With every fiber of whatever counts for what its existence is, it hated me. And I was paralyzed for a moment when I recognized I was in a room with something that I couldn't see because I was not opening those covers. As much as childish as it is, I was not moving from that. I pulled them tighter over me. So no sleep paralysis involved. Thank God. I've never experienced that. And then it was standing wherever this thing was by the door on the side inside of my room. Then like that teleported to my side and blasted me with the coldest feeling I've ever felt in my life. And I like the cold. I once walked around in Washington, D.C. in the midst of a snowstorm in a T-shirt and, shorts because I like the cold. I was under the covers, very good covers, I might add, and I was chilled to the bone. And I'm wrapping around to try and defend myself. I have no means of protecting myself. But like you said, that encountering evil, you can tell. This is something else. And then finally just got to the point I said, God, I can't do this. I need your help. Please save me. The instant I said that, It was gone. Moved up the covers. It was like nothing had ever been there. Now, yeah, I don't have photographic proof. I don't have a video showing the play-by-play, but I have what I experienced. And that told me that there are things out there that hate us, that don't want us to be doing good things. I'm to this day feeling like it's something that had latched onto him earlier, my new roommate, and didn't want me around him because he knew I'd be a good mentor in that area. That may be me editorializing, but that's where I'm at. So that's pretty much the end of the story.
Yeah, it's so that whole idea of encountering something that hates you is wild. So I was part of an investigation that separate from the one that I don't really tell the story of too much. That there was a group of us, and there was this this woman that claimed to be empathic and all of that sort of stuff, and had experienced the idea of being a medium and all of that. And so we were in the ballroom of this giant hall that has hundreds of years of history and background and all of that. It was an old Masonic lodge for like the Freemasons, and we're in the one ballroom, and there she says, I feel like there's something that's trying to communicate through me, and me being young and dumb encouraged her to allow it to kind of to communicate through her and all of that sort of stuff, not in any way, shape, or form actually understanding what was happening in this moment. Well, a couple minutes passed by, and it didn't really dawn on me as everything was happening in real time that she had gone quiet. And I looked over at her. She's sitting at this table, and it was like a wedding setup sort of thing to it. And so she would be sitting where one of the bridal party would have been sitting. And she's just staring at me. And mind you, there's just this look that just when you see hatred personified or hatred manifested, it's really hard to forget that. It's really hard not to like that. That's the kind of thing that resonates inside of you. And so I'm just looking at her, and I'm just I start to get closer, and this look starts to intensify. And there's a dude sitting right next to her, like another one of our team members, just sitting right to the side to her. And I'm like, that whole side of his body stone cold because of just radiating coldness from her. And the only thing that I can describe around her was it was almost like distortions in airwaves, like the old tube TVs where you would start to lose the signal and you would start to see the graininess and all of that sort of thing, because it was literally the signal that was that was decayed in some way, because usually wires or something like that, the old tube TV setups and all that sort of stuff. Just dated myself. It's fine. But I hate that there are some people watching this that may have no idea what I'm talking about. Cable, what are you talking about? Yeah. Anyway,
how dare technology march on?
How dare? So the it's the best thing I can describe it as is it looked like there was like distortion behind it, and just it was just this overwhelming feeling of hatred and disdain that was all being directed specifically at me. Because, to answer your question, sometimes you're the moron in the room. Sometimes you actually step forward and say, part of how I'm going to elicit a reaction is to try to annoy the piss out of this thing in an effort to try and get that response. And so I'm sitting there and I'm antagonizing and I'm needling and I'm talking and I'm just not shutting up and all of that sort of stuff. And after the whole thing was said and done, which the transitionary point was almost like the two of us kind of coaxing her back a little bit, like talking her into kind of like what seemed like regaining herself and all of that. And mind you, the entire team had mental health workups. We all agreed on it, so that way if people came at us, there we were ironclad among the team, and so no history of mental illness or anything else like that. And she just talks about how it felt like there was just this overwhelming hatred towards me, wanting me to shut up, wanting to stop me from talking, that she just wanted to pounce from where she was sitting and attack me. And that it was her, it took everything in her self-control to stop herself from coming after me and all of that. And she talked about how she kept seeing this brown-haired woman and kept getting the feeling of a car accident, like just this repeated notion of a car accident and all this sort of stuff. And there were some other factors that kind of that lined up with a married couple where the wife was killed not long after they had gotten married there, in a car accident. You look for a white minivan hard enough, you're going to find a white minivan. So whatever, yes. You know what I mean? You can make honest statements one way or the other about that and not be outside of the realm of decency. But like you said, while there wasn't a video camera going or pictures or anything else like that, I know what I experienced.
Yeah. Well, Joe, is there anything else you'd like to add before we discuss what we're going to do next time?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, guys, thank you very much for listening. Had a blast with this one. Did not see it go as long as it did, but I'm very grateful for it because I think this was a very productive conversation. As you know, pretty much every conversation I have with Joe is. You know, I may annoy him every now and then, may start pushing his buttons every now and then, but he keeps coming back, and that just makes me want to do it more. So please get a chance, just leave a comment down below, like the video, share it with your friends. That creates more engagement, obviously, but it also helps reach other people who may be interested in topics like this, you know, whether it be from a more rational perspective, skeptical, religious perspective, whatever. Like, we want to try and give the best possible when we're covering these topics. And next time, for the month of September, we're going to be going into, as we're switching things up, because normally we'd be going into religious strangeness, but Joe wanted to do something for October, very spooky. So we're doing exorcisms in October. So we're switching the weird and the unexplained to be in September. And we're going to be doing the disappearance of the colony at Roanoke, North Carolina. Very, not really personal to me, just because I'm North Carolinian, but one that's definitely been part of what I grew up listening to. So I'm looking forward to that one. Joe, anything else for the good people before we leave?
No, I appreciate you all tuning in for a longer episode. One thing that would be of a great service to us is, as you are watching this, as you are engaging with the stream, we touch on a lot of topics that are a little bit more mysterious, a little bit more unexplainable, things like that, and things that have a tendency to elicit questions or responses from folks and things like that. So along the way, as you are watching, if you would do us the favor and chime in the comment section, ask any questions that you may have, engage with what we say, because we do care about the engagement with the audience, and we do want to hear from you as well as we explain the unexplainable.
All right. So until next time, guys. See ya.